Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Michaels, and I am a senior in interior design at Meredith College, and I'll be graduating this May. CSA Day obviously looks a little bit different this year. We're virtual because of COVID-19, but I still wanted to show you a little bit about myself, as well as a look at my resume and my portfolio. So I will share my portfolio real quick. All right. So as I mentioned before, my name is Kristen Michaels, and this is my CSA Day portfolio. Again, this is just going to be a quick snapshot of my portfolio. If you would like to see more, I'm more than happy to send it to you. That information and how you can contact me will be on my resume, which is on the next slide. So here's a quick look at my resume. As you can see, my email and my phone number are in the upper left corner. So feel free to email me or text or call me. This is actually my second degree. My first degree is from NC State in construction engineering. I graduated in May 2017, and then shortly after moved to Dallas, Texas to work for McCarthy Building Companies. When I was working for McCarthy Building Companies, I specifically managed projects at Texas Women's University and for Southwest Airlines at their headquarters over at Dallas Love Field. So my role while I was there was project engineer. And in that role, I was on site every single day for the projects, managing 75% of job site subcontractors. So I specifically managed MEP, building enclosure, interiors, and finishes. I would say one of the only things I didn't really deal with was more of your structure, so your steel and your concrete. That being said, that was a great experience. I think it set me up very well for what I'm doing now in interior design. I did have one interior design internship. It was cut sadly short by COVID-19, but it was with NC State within their procurement office. So I worked directly with the campus interior designer to help choose finishes for projects on the university and present and set up presentations. I helped also work within the resource library and assisted with presenting the materials to the clients. So some leadership positions that I've held. I currently am the treasurer for Kappa Omicron Nu, which is the National Honor Society for Human and Environmental Sciences. I was the secretary of the NC State chapter of Associated General Contractors, which then I helped lead a team to go to a design build competition in Atlanta, Georgia. And finally, I was the ritualist for Kappa Alpha Theta fraternity at NC State, which just kind of got me out in front of people. Again, it was a great leadership role. Some of my key skills are SketchUp, Revit, AutoCAD, Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator. So as I mentioned before, this is just a small snapshot of what I've done at my time at Meredith, but I did want to go over 3 projects with you as well as some of my personal creative expression. So the first project we'll look at is an ADA residential duplex. I did this project my sophomore studio class, so Interior Design Studio 2, and that was last spring. So the goal for this project was to design a residential duplex that was completely universally designed and visitable for people in wheelchairs. So the families that were moving into this duplex were actually a set of grandparents, their child, and that child's spouse, as well as that younger family's child. So the duplex on the left is the duplex that I designed for the grandparents, and the duplex on the right is the duplex I designed for the younger family. So I would say that this project was very heavily focused on kitchen and bath design, especially when it came to universal design and ADA design clearances. So that for the first unit, we wanted to make sure that almost every single space was universally designed, and if not, was definitely accessible for both of those, the grandmother and the grandfather, because they are deciding to age in place The grandfather's already in a wheelchair, so that was a main focus for designing that space. The younger families duplex space, I focused very heavily on making it visitable, or the visitability. So the kitchen, a bathroom, and the living room all had to be completely universally designed, and the other spaces I tried to make more visitable. So you can see that on the unrendered floor plan on this sheet, and then on the top you will see the unrendered and the rendered bathroom elevation from household 2, which again was the younger family. So in there I really wanted to focus on making sure that the sink was ADA accessible, that there were handrails, that there was a 5-foot turnaround within the space, and you can see that a little bit better in the floor plan and the renderings. So continuing on with that project, here is a rendered floor plan, which I rendered in Photoshop. This was my first experience rendering in Photoshop. I actually really enjoyed it. I know it's a lot different than rendering in SketchUp because it is that kind of 2-dimensionality, but I really enjoyed being able to make it look 3D, even though it was a plan view of the space. And I also think that it gives you a good idea of the materiality. You can see what materials were used where, which were shown a little bit more on my mood board, but I definitely wanted to include that in my portfolio. So I also have an unrendered and a rendered elevation of the kitchen in household 1. So this was the grandparents' kitchen. All of the appliances were accessible, and I made sure that the countertop space, or the countertop height, was accessible and actually had a lowered portion for someone in a wheelchair to be able to work at. And as you can see at the sink, it's completely accessible to roll under. All the fixtures are also accessible. So for my second project, this was something a little different, and I really actually loved this project. It was a shipping container hotel for a site in Raleigh. All we were given was the site, and we were told that it would be built completely out of recycled shipping containers. So the bottom level of this hotel was actually to be more of a public space that people from Raleigh could come and visit, and then the upper floors were actual rooms that could be rented out. So I wanted to show a little bit of my process work. So I made sure to include some relationship diagrams and a bubble diagram that just kind of gave an idea of how people would move throughout the space. On the bottom here, you get a little bit more of a schematic framework showing that separation between the bottom floor and the upper floors and how those were kind of laid out. And again, you see kind of a 3D rendering of what the hotel as a whole would look like. So after we worked on the macro level, so for the whole hotel, kind of laying out the space, we also decided to do the actual units themselves. So this sheet shows my unit that I did within the project. Each of the rooms were made up of 2 shipping containers. So on the left here, you see my unrendered floor plan, kind of how I thought about the space, what I laid out where, as well as a rendered floor plan. That's because this class was for a process and presentation class. It's where we first learned about hand rendering. And so I was definitely trying to use that as much as possible. Here you also see a 2-point perspective of my finished space. And I just thought this was a really cool project, and I really tried to play into NC State and people who might be visiting this area because it is on the corner adjacent to the bell tower at NC State. For my third project, I worked on designing a lounge for the Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games. This was a Studio 3, so a junior level studio class project that I did this past fall. The goal of this project was to design a lounge that athletes for the 2021, now that they've been postponed, Tokyo Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games could use. So all we were really given was that it was a maximum of 1,000 square feet, and that it needed to be ADA compliant, obviously, so Paralympic athletes could also use the space. So here I show a dimension floor plan as well as an RCP. And then a rendered floor plan and a couple of my elevations. Due to this project being in Tokyo, I really wanted to capture the feeling of being in Tokyo without culturally appropriating. So this project was very research heavy. I made sure to research what was sacred to Japanese culture and make sure I steered clear of it. I made sure to make it feel Japanese though with the use of shoji screens, tatami mats, Japanese inspired art and light fixtures. And so you'll see that on the next page when I look a little bit more at my renderings. So for this project, I absolutely loved doing my renderings. This was one of the projects where I was actually able to use SketchUp to render. So here I have 3 different views of the space where you have a view of Tokyo. You can see some of that Tokyo inspired art, light fixtures, even the table, the table and chairs, I made sure to source locally in Japan, also to account for a little bit more of that sustainability. And so I just thought that was really cool. It was a great look. And I also wanted to use show some of my process work. So I have a bubble diagram here, just showing kind of my thought process in the space. So one thing I really wanted to point out in this bubble diagram, which I thought was really cool and I actually implemented in the final project, was obviously the Tokyo Olympics have already been postponed once. If the games were to be held this summer, which it looks like they will be, I still felt like there was going to be some hesitation in allowing guests, family members, people like that to visit with the athletes, to watch the games in person. So I wanted to design a room called a Zoom room that actually would allow the athletes to kind of close themselves off, Zoom with their family and friends, talk about their games, how they're going, how they're feeling, things like that. Just allow them to be able to communicate because COVID-19 is a thing. And another thing I wanted to incorporate was a meditation room. This room would allow athletes to unwind, do yoga, things like that, just so they could calm themselves before the games actually began. So the last thing I wanted to look at is a little bit of my creative expression. A little bit about me. I love hiking. I love nature. I love baking cakes and crocheting. So a lot of the things that I do in my free time are actually a way of expressing myself. One thing that I've really started to fall in love with and have tried to improve my skills every month, as you can see from the dates on these cakes, are my ability to make a cake, my ability to not only make it taste good, but also to make it look appealing. So here are 3 of my most recent cakes. Obviously during the pandemic, my sister got married and she didn't have anyone to make her cake. So I was like, you know what? I've never made a wedding cake before, but I'm going to do it. So that's what the wedding cake in May 2020 is. The anniversary cake I actually made for my parents who celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary this past year, which is the pearl anniversary. So I made sure to put edible pearls on it. And that was one of my favorite experiences with piping so far. And then the birthday cake on the bottom was for my 25th birthday last year. And it was the first time I used buttercream icing to make flowers. The crocheted baby blanket. I love crocheting. It's something I do on a regular basis. This was actually my first baby blanket. My sister just had a baby last year. And so I wanted to make something for her. And that's what that is. I also have a diaper cake, an acrylic self-portrait that I did in one of my studio art classes, and a self-portrait that I did using Adobe Illustrator in my Illustrator class last fall. So that is it. That is who I am. That's what I like to do. Again, please feel free to reach out to me via email, text, or phone call. I would love to hear from you guys soon, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your CSA day. Thank you.